Here is a tutorial for harmonic dictations in Aural Skills 211. How it will work is you'll have a soprano line and a bass line that you need to dictate and Roman numerals. There will also be inner voices played, but you do not need to dictate those. Please keep in mind in the Aural Skills Guru YouTube channel, you will have videos that have all 4 voices. Don't worry about the alto and tenor, but you will need to dictate the soprano and the bass. Here is the harmonic dictation we're going to dictate together right now. Now, the suggestions I have for completing a harmonic dictation successfully is you do need to get one of the voices all by itself. You may not be able to dictate 2 voices, and actually after you dictate one, I don't necessarily suggest just dictating the other. For the most part, it is easiest to get the soprano. For example, you would have written down this. The soprano will be very smooth. The bass will skip around quite a bit. So that's why I do suggest that you try to dictate the soprano by itself. I know there are some bass clef readers out there who may hear the bass so well that they dictate the bass first. That's not a universal thing by any stretch. So do whatever you feel is best, but for the most part, dictate one voice as best you can, because it will give you a tremendous amount of information. For example, now that we have a soprano line, we can now treat this as a melody harmonization from your music theory class. If we are in G major, then we can find out the possible Roman numerals for each note. Every single note will have 3 possible Roman numerals. For instance, a G in G major will be 1, 6, or 4. So this will also be 1, 6, or 4. A will be 2, 5, or 7. So this will likewise be 2, 5, or 7. And then a B will be in 1, 6, or 3. So you know those are the Roman numerals that are going to fit down here. So after you do a melody harmonization, I want you to use all of those things you've been learning in your music theory class to decide what would be logical and what would be most likely using these Roman numerals and that melody line. For example, it'd be very strange to start this G major excerpt on a 6 or a 4. So it's most likely going to be a 1. Likewise, you hear a feeling of completeness and closure at the end. The only way that happens is with 1. And more in particular, you know that feeling of closure comes from cadences like an authentic cadence, which is 5 going to 1. So that's already a tremendous amount of information to put down here. 1, 5, and 1. What's nice is that gives you some bass notes. All of these notes skipped around in the bass, but if you hear that function, that logical 5 dominant chord that happens right there, you know that that's going to be a D. And that goes to G. So now all you'll have is 2 notes right in between. So now you have some decisions to make. We're not going to have just 1 and 1. I suppose this could be 1, 6. That's a possibility. So there may be some inversions that happen. But for the most part, you hear this note going up. If you hear the bass jumping up, is 6 a very good option? No, because that would be all the way up here. That's way too far. Remember, we called 6 the submediant, and that means going down by a third. So it's much more likely that this is going to be 4. That's a very strong move from 1 to 4. Likewise, if 5 is coming up here, it'd be weird for it to go to 5 already, plus 5 going there from 4 to 5. That would be parallel fifths. So use that music theory knowledge you've been learning. So 5 is not a very good choice. Likewise, 7, is 7 a good choice right now? No, you will rarely ever hear a 7 from me. 2 is a much better choice. 1 to 4 is nice and strong. 4 to 2 is a root movement of a third, which is pretty strong. And 2 to 5 is very strong. So that makes a lot of sense. So look and see how much reasoning goes into these harmonic dictations. It's not just trying to hear every single note and then making a random guess on the Roman numerals. It is very methodical and very logical to be able to hear this. Here, I'll play it again. Possible mistakes. Let's run through a few possible mistakes. What might have gone wrong? Well, the first thing to ask is, does the soprano, bass, and Roman numerals all match? For example, if you had a D and a G and a Roman numeral 6, notice there's no possible way that you can have a 6 in G major, a D, and a G. So you know something is wrong. So that's the first thing to look for, that your 3 parts don't agree. Second thing can be found in what I call wild inversions. Like, for example, maybe you had this A and that A right there, but you called it 7 diminished of 6, or 7 diminished in a first inversion. That's wild and crazy. Remember, our purpose of an inversion is to make the bass more smooth. If the bass is jumping around a whole bunch, we're not going to have an inversion.